As smaller companies continued to be destroyed, and as average investors on Main Street lost their shirts to naked short selling, John Harmer, a former California state senator and lieutenant governor under Ronald Reagan, became intrigued with this little-known practice.
Like most people in this country, when I first heard the term naked short selling, I had no clue as to what they were mentioning.
But Harmer soon discovered that naked short selling had decimated the value of many small companies.
I sat down with one individual who was able to go onto his computer and in real time show me what was happening into the stocks of several of these companies on that day as naked short selling was taking place.
The evidence was astonishing.
Everybody denied that it was brokers in the big brokerage houses that were doing it, but we were able to identify very clearly that that's exactly who was doing it, driving down the value of those stocks, driving the company out of business. A lot of that was going on without these CEOs knowing it, or they knew it was happening, but they just said, don't tell me about it. I don't want to know what the guys in the back room are doing.
Harmer began to dig deeper to learn more about the fraud.
I turned all the sources I could think of, the internet, lawsuits, etc.
Armed with this information, he took his concerns to the Senate Banking Committee, who had oversight of the SEC.
I went to Senator Bennet in the Senate Banking Committee and brought to them then specific examples of the flagrancy of what was being done and the inaction by the Securities and Exchange Commission in the face of this evidence.
Senator Bennet jumped on board, but Harmer and Bennet faced an uphill battle convincing other senators to even acknowledge the problem.
They had no clue what I was talking about. And yet I would tell them, look, we're talking about the economic future of this country. We're talking about the segment of industry that produces the most jobs, small business. We need to keep them alive and well. And they're being destroyed by a very small group of predatory people who are using their power to make a fortune for themselves, a fortune that often isn't even taxed the way it works, and then walking away from the ashes.
Harmer and Bennet continued their crusade to clean up Wall Street.
Now, Senator Bennet, he was willing to go forward, he was committed, and in fact, we had this piece of legislation drafted.
But just when it looked like Congress would finally take the lead against fraud on Wall Street, Harmer and Bennet ran into a stone wall, one erected by the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation.
They have such enormous power. They are able to be totally off the record, totally invisible, but wield enormous impact upon what's going on.
As the fails-to-deliver problem continued to escalate, advocates and economists began to take a closer look at the DTCC. Especially a process they use to clear the trades, called the stock-borrow program.
The broker looks for shares, can't find them, says to the seller, can't find the shares, he says, proceed.
The DTCC steps in, the stock-borrow program essentially fills that role.
And this is where critics believe the problem lies. When a broker transacts a short sale and no shares are available, the stock-borrow program allows the transaction to go through without borrowing the stock from another shareholder's account.
So there are now two sets of shares representing the same shares. Those shares appear electronically in both accounts. It's the same share. One of them is a phantom share. We know that the DTCC is clearing trades even when they can't locate the shares through the stock-borrow program. In those cases, the stock-borrow program claims their shares but never finds them.
Since Suzanne Trumbeth first learned of the fraud in 1993, this little hole in the system has grown into a chasm.
The DTCC, through its stock-borrow program, has in effect created hundreds of millions of phantom shares.
And it multiplies on a continual basis.
On any given day, there are between 500 million and 1 billion shares have been sold and failed to deliver.
Your stock is getting lent to this firm, to that firm, to this firm, to that firm. Each firm gives each other an IOU, but at the end of the day, if everybody went and claimed their stock and said, give me my physical certificates, they would not be able to do it.
Having spoken to people within the market who admitted that they were actually doing this, they were taking advantage of this loophole, we realised that this was an immense problem.
So big, it's so systemic, it involves people with so much money, multiple billionaires. Well, I wonder how they're making that much money. Well, I have my ideas from this activity.
They operate from an inherent position of conflict of interest in which their owners earn profits off of the transactions of naked short sales.
Why would we take an organization that's privately owned and put it in control of $30 trillion a month of transactions with essentially limited supervision? Who owns it? The New York Stock Exchange owns it. All the prime brokers own it.
Its members just happen to be Wall Street.
The same parties who would have to enforce delivery.
And there's been no forced accountability.
So the fox is watching the henhouse.
And the fox is eating all the eggs.